So Jackie and I, if you haven't been here before, are co-hosts for How to Build a Fire, and this season 7. And this was started by Terrence, the guy who's driving, Terrence Tegnan, who is a poet and storyteller and all-around great driver, I hear. And he started this thing 7 years ago in the gallery, which is open source gallery in South Slope, Brooklyn. And we've always done it live, but there's this pandemic thing, you may have heard of it. Anyway, so we've been doing it via Zoom, which is kind of cool because then we can have people from South Carolina or Texas join us. So it's been really kind of nice getting to sort of expand our world a little bit. It's not as, we don't get to drink as much cheap wine, but you know, Monica's saving money. So Monica is our the artistic director of Open Source Gallery and has very kindly allowed us to use her space. And there's a really cool exhibit there right now, which is open to the public. So I'll let her tell you about it later. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce Frances Greathead, who's our first storyteller of the evening. Frances and I met at Bennington Writers Seminars, and both getting, I think I was there a little bit before you. I can't keep track of the whole class thing, you know, who graduated when, but and then we've been in a writers group since. And she has become a political organizer, and in addition to a writer, and is a political giving consultant living in Ditmas Park. She graduated from Bennington seminars in fiction, right? Emphasis in fiction?
Yeah, dual genre, fiction and nonfiction.
Excellent. Perfect for the political climate, because everything's fake, or is it? I'm not sure. Anyway, that's what my brother thinks. Anyway, so welcome, Frances Greathead, our first storyteller of the evening, and then we will spotlight her face on this. Is that Monica's doing? Yeah, great.
Cool. Thanks, Lily, for inviting me and everyone for coming. So the theme tonight is luck, and I'm telling a story about a romantic friendship. So when Anthony kissed me, I told him that I loved him, which at the time seemed like the stupidest mistake I possibly could have made. But in hindsight, I realized was actually really lucky. So when he kissed me, we were in our early 30s and we'd met 11 years earlier in college. We both went to Hampshire College. We were both older students who took time off and started at other schools and then transferred in. And we both really wanted to be writers. I remember the first time I saw him, it was in this literary journalism class. And the professor, this guy, Michael Lessie, was like notoriously an asshole. And he would make people apply to the class. So you had 24 hours to do an assignment, and then he picked like the best 15 assignments. So I met Anthony that first class when we'd both been accepted, and Michael Lessie had chosen to read my story aloud to the class. So I was sitting there like so nervous listening to my story and just looking around the room. And that's when I noticed Anthony for the first time. And I liked him immediately. I think that it's because there was something about his face that was just like, I could tell he was really sensitive and really intelligent. But now that I'm older and can kind of know myself a little better, I think there was like this recognition of something that I saw in him that I had in myself, which was like this kind of tormented, insecure ambition. Anthony dropped out of the class. He later told me that Michael Lessie was the kind of old professor who only liked his male students if they worshiped him. And Anthony was never going to worship him, so he was never going to like Anthony's writing. So Anthony and I were in different friend groups, but we were always in writing classes together. And every time I saw him, I just got this like fluttery, excited feeling that I really liked. And but I was in a relationship for all of college with this guy, Noah. And Noah did not like my writing. Even as I started to become successful, I got a story accepted into the Massachusetts Review. Noah wasn't impressed by the story. He wasn't impressed that I was writing. And he was like the only person whose opinion I cared about. So I just became increasingly insecure. And Noah had started this student group that had Hampshire students tutoring Somali refugees in Springfield, which was a city about 30 minutes away from Hampshire. And I joined the student group. And the first time I tutored, I immediately loved it. I was like naturally really good at it. And it just made me feel better than anything I'd done in a really long time. So gradually during my time at Hampshire, I withdrew more and more from writing, which was just harder and harder to do. And I was more and more drawn to education. So by the time I graduated, I wasn't writing at all. And I went straight to UMass for a 1-year accelerated master's in teaching program where I would be teaching all day in Springfield and then taking classes in the evenings. And at the end, I'd have my master's in teaching and my certificate. I'd be a licensed teacher. This was the worst year, hardest year of my life. I turned out to be a terrible teacher. Tutoring is not like teaching. I did not have the confidence or the self-possession to have any control over a room full of 7th graders. And I loved my students and I just felt like I was failing them every day. And I was exhausted and miserable all the time. And then every weekend I would go out with Noah and I would just get like totally drunk. Twice I got so drunk that I passed out and vomited in the middle of the night. And when I woke up and there was puke on my comforter, all I could think to do was just like wrap it up in a ball and put it in a garbage bag and put it in the trunk of my car. So by midwinter, that had happened twice. I was driving around with 2 garbage bags filled with balled up comforters with puke in them. And I hated my life. And I was still in this miserable relationship with Noah. And at some point I learned that Anthony lived across the street from me. So I was living in this house in Northampton and my bedroom was on the 1st floor at the front of the house. So like right on the street. And then right across the street on the 2nd floor was Anthony's apartment. And he had this 2nd story porch that kind of like tilted towards the street. So the house looks like a cake that was like the top of it was sliding off the bottom. So I was at night, like in my bed with no comforter, always kind of aware of Anthony across the street from me. Like I had this feeling like his apartment one night might just like slide off into my bedroom. One day that spring, I walked out of the house on Cherry Street and a copy of Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson was on the porch with a note in it from Anthony that said, "I think you'll really like this book." And I loved it. It meant so much to me. I had not written a word since I graduated from college. And I was just, I loved that book. I read everything I could find by Marilyn Robinson in like a week. And I just felt seen by Anthony. Sometime that June, Noah broke up with me over GChat. He broke up with me the night before he went on a trip to a small village in Mexico where he wasn't going to have any internet or cell phone service. So it was sudden and final. And again, like I was devastated, but oh my God, I'm so lucky that happened. So he was gone from my life and I was finishing this master's program and I had to decide, was I going to stay in Northampton and try to build a new life and be friends with someone like Anthony, who is the only person I knew outside of my friend group that I shared with Noah, or was I going to go back to New York City where my family was? And I was just too young and too scared to stay on my own in Northampton. So I went home to New York. I got a job as a high school counselor, which I was much better at than teaching. And I stayed in touch with Anthony and stayed connected to Hampshire because I would bring my students once or twice a year on a college trip to visit Hampshire. So Anthony graduated, but he stuck around at the writing center as a tutor. So I would see him once or twice a year and we talk about writing, but we talk about his writing, but I was really not writing at all. Like my whole life was my job. I didn't have any time to write or any time, and I don't think this is an accident, I didn't have any time to date. Now looking back on it, I think that, you know, whatever happened in my relationship with Noah, I never wanted to be in that position again. And it just so disturbed me that I'd been so stuck in love with someone who treated me so horribly that, you know, I just, let alone like not trusting other people, I just didn't trust myself. So I was very single. And anyway, about 4 years into this new New York City life, I had a pretty rough couple of months. My grandmother died, and that grief just like split my heart open. And the first guy who like passed me, like just got caught up in there. So I fell totally in love with this guy who had a drinking problem, and was just like a lost writer. He was basically like a younger version of myself that I just like seemed so brave and so amazing to me. But he was not in love with me and he broke my heart. So I was grieving and heartbroken, and I kind of had like a scary couple of weeks where I was like, I think I might like go crazy. But then I started writing. I started writing this novel in my phone in the notes section. And I didn't tell anyone, and I barely even admitted it to myself because it was just like such a shocking thing that I was suddenly writing a novel. And I did that for a year. I just wrote in the notes section of my phone, like on lunch breaks, when I was walking down the street, at stop signs, whatever, pedestrian walks. Anyway, a year into it, I put it on my computer and I had 90 something pages of this novel. And I was like, holy shit, I think I have to do this. I think this like, echo. I think someone, okay. This makes me feel really good. I have to do this. And the first person I thought of was Anthony. So I emailed Anthony and I said, I'm writing again and I'm working on a novel and I want you to read it. And Anthony responded like within minutes. And he said, that's crazy because I'm writing a novel also. And I was going to ask you to read it. So I think like in that moment, I kind of fell in love with him in my imagination, even though I'd hardly seen him in so long. But here was this guy who like supported my writing and liked my writing and was also writing. So I sent him my novel and he sent me all these like really nice things about it. And we made plans. He was still living near Northampton and we made plans for me to come up and so we could go out to dinner and talk about it. Since I was going to be in the Hampshire area, I met up with my old college advisor who was this writing professor, not the asshole professor, Michael Lessie, but this other writing professor named Will, who was like just this wonderful, jolly old man who everyone like wished was their dad. So Will, the nice professor, and I met up for a drink in Northampton, and we were sitting in the window of the bar, and it's a kind of small town. So just by coincidence, Anthony walked past. And Will said, oh, is that Anthony? And I said, yeah, I think so. I'm actually going to see him later. And Will said, Anthony's not a nice guy. And he kind of gave me this look. He was like, you want to be with a nice guy? You should hang out with that kid, Andrew. Andrew's a nice guy. Anthony is not a nice guy. And I thought, that's weird. Like, why would Will say that? Why would Will not like Anthony? I met up with Anthony. He was so nice about my novel. We had an amazing night. Nothing happened. But, you know, my feelings kind of just like got stronger and stronger for him. And I went back to New York City and there was just all this space in my imagination for me to think about him. Over the next couple of years, that was kind of our friendship. I showed him all of my writing. We would meet up every couple of months. We would have long dinners. He was so encouraging, so nice. As we got to be better friends, he started to tell me about his romantic life, which was troubled. He was constantly falling for women who were in relationships and would cheat on their boyfriends with him. And then when they left their boyfriends, he would no longer be interested. So I basically decided, but I really like loved him. So I didn't quite see this for what it was, but I basically decided like, this is good. He's filling some emotional need and I'm safe because we're just friends. So let me just keep things how they are. until, you know, my writing kept going. I went back and got my MFA. So 3 years into this kind of like intense friendship with Anthony and me writing my novel, Anthony suddenly told me he was moving to New York City. This was obviously really exciting. We started, like, I was in the final semester of my MFA program, so I was working really hard on my novel, but we started having dinner once a week, and it got more and more intimate. I mean, at this point, I was like, he was the person I was telling everything in my life. And I just felt so close to him. So that night when he kissed me, finally, of course, I said, I love you. And we had like this wonderful makeout session, and he did not tell me that he loved me back. He did say, "You smell good." And that's really important to me. So that's good. And, you know, I should have like thought something about that. I should have thought about what my old advisor Will said about him. I should have thought about all the things I knew about his relationships, but I was just so excited, and the kiss was just so amazing that I went to bed that night and I couldn't sleep because I just thought, like, this is it. This is my happily ever after. 2 days later, the next time I saw Anthony, he came over, and it was clear that he also hadn't really been sleeping also ever since the kiss, but for the opposite reason. He wanted to know, why did I tell him that I loved him when he kissed me? That really worried him, because did I want him to be my boyfriend? Because he really wasn't good at that. And, you know, if I was looking for someone to like go to museums with, that just wasn't the kind of thing he could do. And I was going to have to do all the work if we were in a relationship. So we should just be friends who have sex. And I was devastated because I'd now spent 48 hours like fantasizing about our future together, even though that was like kind of delusional. And all I wanted was to have sex with him, but I did not want to be one of those girls who I'd heard about for years. Like, I knew what was going to happen. And I just said, no. I said, Anthony, I want a real relationship with a boyfriend who is nice to me and can take care of me. And there was this pause, and he said, really? You do? And I kind of felt the same way. Like, that was the first time in the 10 years, or maybe less than that, since Noah had broken up with me on GChat, that I had articulated something like that. Because I had just been so afraid to trust myself. But in that moment, when I rejected Anthony and all the dysfunctional, fucked up shit that he wanted, you know, the relationship that we were going to have, because I knew it wasn't going to be good for me, for the first time, I finally trusted myself. So I haven't talked to Anthony since. We are no longer friends, and that makes me really sad because he was such a good friend to me. But I am so grateful to him for proving to me that I could finally trust myself to be in a healthy relationship and not end up in a situation where someone treats me like an asshole because I love them. So that's my story.
Wow, thank you. Wow, that was amazing. We're giving you a round of snaps here. Some of us are muted.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Frances. Can we get back to the gallery view here? Let's see.
Thank you, Frances.
That sounded like Jackie.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
Yeah, that was a great story. I'm still like in my feelings about it, but thank you for sharing it with us. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our next storyteller for tonight. Katy Lyle was born on New York's East River in the summer of 1959. She feels fortunate to have grown up around people who wrote and told stories. She's been told all of her life that she ought to write more such stories down. Maybe she will. So I'm going to introduce you guys to Katy. I'm not even going to ask her permission because I always say what I want anyway. But Katy and I met in a cafe in the Village oh my God, like 6 or 7 years ago now. And we've become like these absolute great friends. We just said a couple of like, whatever, funny things to each other. And everywhere we go, we laugh and drink wine. So she's one of my very good friends. And I thank her for being here tonight. Katy? Unmute.
Thank you. Hello. On trying to do this, I found that nailing a beginning, middle, and end was perhaps the most challenging thing in a life that's been lived pretty much a stream of consciousness. I was thinking about luck, and I would say I've been luckiest in my friendships. And I would start by saying that my parents introduced themselves as friends would by name. Hi, I'm Audrey. This is Dave. We grew up in a house calling them Audrey and Dave. And my mother was a pacifist and an anarchist and an activist. My father was a skeptic and a reporter. I was lucky they'd met at all. They both went to Cornell. My mother got a scholarship at 16, full ride. My father was on the GI Bill, but he graduated by the time my mother was there, and he was just running up to Ithaca to see his old roommates. And the roommates themselves, like, make me think of how much it was another time that people really sat down and talked. I grew up sitting at kitchen tables, you know. People come, they sit around the kitchen table, they talk for hours, they tell stories. This just goes and goes. This particular roommate situation for my father had been 2 future CIA agents and 2 people who were the shifters of the documents for the Rosenbergs that went to Russia. And I never knew what their conversations were like, but they were great friends, the 5 of them, and they all talked together. So my father came up to visit those guys, and he goes in the apartment and they're not there, but there's a woman talking on the phone, and it's my mother, Audrey, and he watches her talk on the phone for 10 minutes and decides he's going to marry her. And they were married. They knew each other for about 2 weeks before they got married. There were 2 initial events. They went, my mother had a key to a professor's office, and with a guy who was a chaperone, the 3 of them went there and drank a 5th of liquor out of his drawer. And then there was an occasion where my mother went to my father's apartment in New York City, which was called the Twin Coffins. And she told me later that she had gotten her period and washed out her bloody underwear in the sink, and that he had been very impressed by that. And then, when he proposed, she basically went around to his friends and asked them, so what do you think? Dave Lyle asked me to marry him. What do you think? You know, should I do it? And everybody said, oh yeah, he's a great guy, you know. So soon they were in a car driving to Louisiana, where my father had gotten a job at the Lafayette Advertiser as a reporter, his first writing job. And my mother was tearing up the sex manual from 1800 that her mother gave her and throwing it out the car window. They went to this town called Rising Fawn because they thought it had a nice name. And there was nobody in Rising Fawn. So they went to the next town where they got a blood test, and a guy said, by the power instated in me by the state of Georgia and the Lord Jesus Christ, I pronounce you man and wife. And they were married for 20 years. They spent most of it reading books. I remember seeing them sitting in bed reading books. But there was also the table and the people who came to the table to tell stories, and the things I learned sitting at the table, like you could get out of the draft during the Vietnam War if you had obscene tattoos, and just so many things were exchanged there at the table. And as children, you were basically invisible. But as you can already tell, my parents didn't hold anything back. They gave me all the information they had. And it's been enormous, great good luck that they prepared me. You know, all of you lay down words, keep laying down words. It's all anybody has to go on. You're making the world lucky by writing things down. I also learned that if you left the table and went out into the world, you should come back with a good story. And as I became an adolescent and things got complicated, and I also learned that you could survive anything, you could turn into a good story. It's, you know, I didn't know phrases like reframing then, but, you know, it was useful. The life in Louisiana was 1950s. There's a few details there. Friendship again. They used to shoot pool at a bar called the Bucket of Blood, and my mother was the only female allowed in there, and the only person the bartender would lend his pool cue to. And they were friends. And there's something there about opening and being strong enough to step the other way. Finding luck. And one of the people they met in Louisiana was a man named Enrique Alferez. And I have a whole lot of stories about him, but I'm gonna move to one of those now. He was a Mexican-born Louisiana man who was young enough when Pancho Villa was marching in Mexico that he rode at the head of Pancho Villa's army on a little donkey, and everybody in Pancho Villa's army stuck a religious medal or something to him. And my mother said he was like a giant glittering target, you know, this child with no weapon out front. But he was there for years and he was fine. Nothing happened to him. He was a fortunate man. He could be said to be fortunate in marriage. I'm not sure how you'd look at it. He said, I've been married 17 times because it's the most beautiful thing two people in love can do. Other people say he was only married 9 times, but it's the outlook. Was that good luck? Anyway, so one day my father went to see Ricky, and he was a sculptor, and he was sitting at the bottom of the stairs coming down from his studio, looking disconsolate. And my father asked him what was wrong, and he said, well, I can't go in my studio. And he asked him why, and he said, someone had come that day with a truck and parked the truck and taken a crate off the back and settled it on the lawn, and the crate had a chain from the corner with a spike, and they'd hammered the spike into the ground, broke open the crate, revealing an enormous chimpanzee, and then they took the crate and just left this chimpanzee on the lawn. So he brought the chimpanzee into his studio, and he thought it was interesting, and at first they were kind of playing together. The chimpanzee would imitate what he did. So at first that was funny, making faces and, you know, goofing around. But then he went back to work and it became difficult. The chimpanzee is grabbing his tools and hitting things and making it difficult to be a sculptor. And this went on for some time, like less than a week, but several days. You know, he's got the chimpanzee trying to get in front of the mirror to comb his hair, and the chimpanzee getting in bed and taking the pillows, and and I think probably after a few drinks one day, he decided he'd had enough of this chimpanzee, and he got out his pistol and he loaded it with blanks, and he pointed the pistol at his head and shot a blank. And then he reloaded it with real bullets and handed it to the chimpanzee. And for once, the chimpanzee did not imitate him. The chimpanzee fired one shot randomly into the air and started galloping around the studio. And hence, Ricky Alfaris was sitting at the bottom of the stairs waiting for the other 5 shots, and they had not gone off. And that's where that story ended. So I offer you that story. Ricky Alfaris lived till 1999 and is fabled in Louisiana. He had a good life, despite the chimpanzee. My father took his clippings from his jobs writing at first the Lafayette Advertiser and then the New Orleans Times-Picayune, and he came up to New York, and my mother worked throughout the time they were there, but those are other stories. My mother and father came up to New York, and my father first worked at AP and then the New York Herald Tribune for many years. And the job at the AP, his best friend, who turned out to be one of his best friends for life, was a guy who, when he first came to the AP, the Associated Press, he got the job just because someone had said, hey, they're hiring at the AP. And he thought he was going to the supermarket, the A&P, like he was going to get a bag boy job or something. He never thought about being a writer. It was like the last thing on his mind. And when my father started there, he was like still like the coffee boy, whatever. But he was a great talker, and he taught himself to be a like mechanically solid writer. And he ended up being the guy who wrote the book that the movie Goodfellas is based on. His whole life was writing. It was, his knowledge of New York City and his writing defined his life. He was kind of like an uncle when I was growing up. But again, great good fortune to have answered that job for a bag boy at the A&P. So these stories just roll over one another and go on. My thinking today has to go back to friendship in order to come to the end of this story. And I took care of my father at the end of his life, looked after him for years, but 4 months of sleeping at the foot of the bed, playing jazz music and talking. And one time my sister was there for a week, and I was staying out of the way so she could have her time. And I asked him when I came back, hey, you want me to go away again, And he said, no. And I said, why? Because I was thinking, is it because he knows he's going soon, And he said, because you're my pal. And that was, for many reasons, just an honor. Like any family, we had the divorce and the this and that. And I had wanted him to know how well I knew him. And it took me 20 years to get there. But I became one of the only people he was ever able to tell he loved. And being his pal was great, right? So Right now, my mother is dying. She's down to 8 breaths a minute today. And having taken care of my father and my grandmother, I know she'll probably die tonight. But she was kind of practicing her goodbye phone calls earlier, a week ago, let's say. And she called me up. And she said, "Thank you for being a good friend." And she said, "I still hope to surprise you." That's the end of my story.
Thank you, Katy.
Thank you, guys.
So Katy also had surgery, how long ago now?
The 9th, I had,
Okay, so not,
yeah.
so we decided, she agreed that she would do this because we figured she'd be like still in the, still recuperating, and she'd give it a shot as to something to look forward to. And then Mom, the difficulties came, and we didn't anticipate this, but I called her several times this week to give her the opportunity to pull out. And she said, "No, let's see what happens." You did really good.
Did it go okay?
It went okay. You're a strong lady. And I thank you for for being with us tonight, because I know it's a difficult time. And so we talked about not knowing when to come out of it.
It's probably good, because it would have been more formal if I wasn't in the thick of it. And all the stories I know are much more about the thick of it than formality.
So we thank you for that.
Thank you.
We are, Monica, I'm sorry, before I say Monica, Lily and I hardly ever introduce ourselves. We usually remember it sometime in the middle of this. So I am Jackie Reason, one of the co-hosts. I know you introduced me, one of the co-hosts, and I write and do this kind of thing and hope to do more of it in the future. And Lily is a saxophonist and writer, and we are very grateful to Open Source and to Monica. So we're going to let her talk a little bit about this month's exhibition and anything else you want to tell us, Monica.
Thank you. Amazing stories already today. So yeah, at Open Source at the moment, we have a show that's called Jim Crow, Hell No, and a flashing neon sign invites you to the gallery. The gallery is very safe to come visit because, you know, it's big, wide, big doors that open up. So it's kind of like indoor, outdoor space. So come by and see the show. It's still open until the 1st of April. And we're going to have a little closing party for this show on the 1st of April from 6 to 8, if you want to come by. It's also outside, and yeah, it's perfect. And we have, you know, we also have the next show is gonna open up. Now I have to look that up. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Dominica Castle is the next show, and that's gonna come up a week after somehow. I'll put that in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Terrence, are you out there or are you still driving?
I'm here.
Oh, hi, how are you?
I'm good. Sorry, I was at a writers group thing and then I had to like get back as quickly as possible. That story was amazing. I don't know how you can follow that, like with any real snippets of any kind of information. Jesus Christ.
Yes, absolutely. So are you doing a question for us tonight before we go on to our other two readers?
Oh, yes. Okay, so how many people are here that are listeners? How, if we can scroll through. Do we have other listeners here?
I can't. Yeah, we must.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have
we
1,
do.
2, 3, 4, at least.
Okay, I have a good question then. Name a sentence from your life of a moment of luck that would require everybody else that would hear that sentence to wonder what the hell that story would be. So a moment in your life that was lucky as hell, which would require everybody else that heard that sentence to wonder what the hell that story would be. If that makes any sense.
Can you give us an example, Terrence?
In Louisiana, I was lucky to get out of jail alive.
Oh,
How can you get into any concert you want to go to for free?
Anybody else out there? A moment of luck and a sentence that would require anybody to wonder what the hell that story would be.
Because I sat down on the first alto chair, I got to go to Europe with Mario.
oh,
I don't know.
That's a good one. Monica's is because there was a great fire. We now have our event in a different space.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Anybody else have a sentence that luck had a hand in their lives that would lead us to believe that there's a bigger story at hand?
I have one. I broke my phone in Tanzania.
Mm-hmm.
There's a song about that.
Oh,
I
really?
left my wallet in El Segundo. That's so great, Lily.
I left my one.
After my first day of college, I sat on the curb and waited for the ambulance.
No. And now you have children. Anybody else? Nicola, do you have a sentence that would lead us, that would beg the question?
My brain is a blank. The only thing I could come up with was 3 unviable embryos later.
Whoa, that's really good.
Oh, yeah.
Marcus, what about yourself?
I'm thinking I have so many things like going on in my head. I would say because of my charismatic personality, I was able to receive the 3 credits needed so I could graduate from college.
I've heard many stories like that. Melanie's here and she could say because I punched a cop.
What?
Is she punching you right now, Terrence?
No.
All right. Well, should we get going? All right. We have a storyteller from the UK, Nicola Waldron, who was one of my best buddies at Bennington when we were there together. And she is a poet and essayist, and also, well, I don't know. I guess when it's a bunch of essays together, it's a book. writer of an amazing book. She studied at Cambridge before moving to America in 1996, and she currently lives in Columbia, South Carolina, where she works as a writing and yoga instructor. She's got thumbs down. What, you don't love the place? I've heard so many stories about this place. She has 2 kids, and I guess they're teenagers now. Wow. And they've been, what did she say? All of them have been in the same house now 24/7 for exactly a year. So put your hands together for Nicola Waldron. Yay.
Hey everybody. Wow, I feel like a really lucky intruder. I managed to come up to New York to stay with Lily. I think, was it 2 years ago now? 3 years ago?
I don't know.
Spring break. And I got to meet Monica and had a really fantastic time, and realized that, you know, New York obviously is where life is, and it isn't where I am. But one of the reasons I practice and teach yoga is to try and be grateful for where I am, wherever that is. So, you know, it's not all so bad here. It's just taken me a long time to figure out how to exist here. Anyway, that's another story. I don't really, this is kind of weird. I've actually been working on a revision of a book I've been writing for years now this week, because I happen to have some, thank you, Lily. I happen to have some time this week. I was lucky to have some time, I should say. And I'm telling a story in that book. And really that was the book that I started at Bennington when I met Lily that sort of taught me how to tell a story. Because before that, I was really a poet. But I'd applied to Bennington to do creative nonfiction because I'd had this story about having being infertile and then finally having children, which I wanted to write down as a story rather than a poem. And that's what got me kind of started. But I still don't consider myself a very skilled storyteller, so I'm a bit embarrassed to be here, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to go. So.
Well, to be fair, the whole storytelling series was created by a poet, so you're in good company.
Yay. So I'll do my best, but and I also feel very humbled following the 2 stories that came before for obvious reasons. But hopefully this is sort of a bit of a break, I don't know. When Lily asked me to join the storytelling session, I thought I was doing it last month. So my story has nothing to do with luck. Actually it starts with a little bit of luck, but it's really much more about free will. So there you go. Lily said to me when I was talking to her about preparing, she said, well, the way I do it is I write it down and then I practice the hell out of it, right? So I wrote it down, but then I didn't practice it. So I'm not going to read it because I really want to try and just tell the story because I've never really done that. So I hope you'll forgive me if I kind of practice on you, and I'll just use this as notes. So I might have to look down at my notes. But anyway, I called it a boring, momentous story. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, so exactly a month ago now, I managed to get the first dose of my COVID vaccine. Even though I am a mere 55 years old and I wasn't really in the group that was supposed to get the vaccine. But my family is in England, and one of the things that I've really suffered from is not being able to visit. So my father caught COVID and was in the hospital for 6 weeks. My mother was on her own. There were all these things I wanted to do. So as soon as I heard on the grapevine that there was this kind of workaround for me to get a vaccine, earlier than probably I should have. Even though I felt mildly guilty about it, I jumped on it because I thought, okay, well then maybe this summer, maybe I'll get to see my family. So that's my excuse anyway. But the way that I got my vaccine early, and I wrote down the date because it seems like a kind of momentous date, was 2/21, no, 2/22/21, 2/22/21. So there's something in that. Anyway, or not. But what was happening was down at the university, there's a big football stadium called the Williams-Brice Stadium. Maybe some of you know of it. Massive thing, terrifying. Marcus is saying, yeah. And next to the Williams-Brice Stadium, there is a thing called Gamecock Park. I'll just say that again, Gamecock Park. And the students at the University of South Carolina, where I am lucky enough to teach, walk around with t-shirts that say "Go Cox" on it. So when I first came to South Carolina, this was one of the many things that made me think, this is not a place that I should be. Anyway, I've now been here for 14 years. And it still astonishes me that people have cocks all over their t-shirt, but I suppose I've kind of got used to it. However, football is not a culture that I have been able to embrace, and I apologize to any football fans out there. The main reason is that when I was growing up in England, there was a lot of sort of violence and sort of unpleasant behavior by soccer fans in England. And I grew up kind of thinking that this was not a very good thing, that these guys would get super drunk and then misbehave in horrible ways. And I didn't like it. And then when I came to America and then to South Carolina and learned about the Gamecocks, one of the first stories I heard was from a friend of one of the first people who made friends with me, who I'm still friends with, who told me that her babysitter, and I'm sorry if this is hard to hear, but told me that her babysitter had been raped at the football stadium. So I think I'd been in South Carolina for about a year, maybe, not even at that point. And I was just so horrified that this had happened and that she then disappeared. So she was a live-in babysitter who'd just gone because of this thing that had happened to her. And none of us really knew where she'd gone or what happened afterwards. So I kind of carried that with me. And that thoroughly colored my view of the football program and, everything around it. And I've heard some other not so lovely stories since then. Anyway, how does this connect to my vaccine? So in order to get my vaccine, I had to volunteer at Gamecock Park to, sort of to be a traffic person, right? And so I thought, well, I can do that because I can wear a mask, I'll be outside, all I'll have to do is kind of wave at people, I can manage that. But I was actually, even in spite of that, I was really very nervous about, this is probably the first time I'd been out of the house beyond the block where I lived for a year. We've been very, very, very careful about trying not to catch COVID. Anyway, they said that if you volunteered, if they had doses of the Pfizer vaccine at the end of the session, you could get one. So I thought, well, okay, I can do that. So I got up and drove myself down to Gamecock Park and had to kind of deal with the feelings that I had as I approached this big, scary stadium that held all these, this symbolism for me and other women. But I kind of took a deep breath and just dived in. And when I got there, I got lost several times, so that by the time I actually arrived at the place I was supposed to be, I was already nearly in tears. And Lily will know, I am just an anxiety crier. I get myself so wound up, and then I lose it, right? It's very embarrassing. Anyway, this happened to me at Gamecock Park. So I couldn't find my mask, and I was just a mess. But I finally, indeed, but I finally parked my car, put my masks on. I had 2 masks, right? Put my mask on, and the weather was supposed to be really bad. But when I got there, it was actually kind of warm and balmy in the sort of South Carolina way. And I brought a pair of, this was February, remember, I brought a pair of snow boots and a scarf and a hat and all sorts of things. But when I looked out of the car, I thought, actually, it looks okay. It's too hot for me to lug a pair of boots and a coat, big heavy coat around. So I left them in the car. I took my umbrella because I could see that it might rain. And I went and got in the volunteer queue and got sent to my volunteer post. So they gave me just about the most boring job known to mankind. I told you it was a boring story, right? Which was to stand by the side of the road and watch people who'd had the vaccine to make sure that they didn't have anaphylactic shock. And if they did, I was supposed to contact the nurse, who was kind of back over here, and get them to come over and help. So I stood there, and it got colder and rainier and colder and windier and rainier. And nobody was having anaphylactic shock. And it was desperately boring. And I just really was wishing that somebody would have anaphylactic shock. So that there'd be a little drama, because I had to stand there for 6 hours. And I just thought to this was after about 2 hours, I was like, I just don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm just going to die of boredom standing here. And it was getting colder and windier and rainier. Anyway, nothing happened to anybody. Stood there for hours. Suddenly the wind picks up. There's this massive storm. I've got my umbrella, which I'm kind of holding on to for dear life, but I don't have my boots, and I don't have my scarf, and I don't have a good coat. And I got colder and colder. And I got into that state that you get into, which I imagine we've all been in at some point, where I was so hypothermic that I just thought I was going to die if something didn't happen. Anyway, at about this point, there are a couple of other things that went on, but I'll leave those out because it'll take too long. But about this point, this guy, this very strapping young man, comes striding over. I'm allowed to say that now, I'm 55, right? He's strapping. Anyway, he strode over and said to me and this other guy who'd been also bored out of his mind, standing about 10 feet away from me, not talking to me. I wasn't talking to him either, because we both just hadn't been out this whole time and forgotten how to talk. Anyway, he says, have you had your shots? And we both said no. And he said, would you want one? And we both said yes, because that's obviously why we were both there. Not because out of the goodness of our heart, we wanted to help. And so he said, okay, well, you can go, I'll put someone else on duty and you go get your shot. So we walked up and did all this paperwork we had to do. And I tried to chat with him, and, he told me he had a wife, and that was the end of the conversation, right? Which is what happens in South Carolina. If you try to talk to somebody of the opposite sex, you are obviously immediately going to steal them away from their spouse. So anyway, that's just a PS. Another reason I love living here. Okay, anyway. We go to get our shots, and I'm so excited that I'm ripping my shirt off my shoulder ready to get my shot, so that the woman who's going to give me, that's right, Lily, the woman who's going to give me the shot actually has to say to me, no, keep your clothes on. So, anyway, finally she's ready with the shot, and I pull down my sleeve again, And, you know, I didn't give a crap whatever anybody saw. I just wanted this damn shot so I could go see my mother and father and be safe. Get the shot. And then I'm shivering because I'm still hypothermic, right? And so then I walk back down the field to this boring place where I'm supposed to carry on doing this boring job for 2 more hours. And there's no cars. There is nobody else getting a shot. And I'm so depressed by this because I had this idea that there'd be millions of people, thousands at least, right? Driving by, shot, 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 shot. And the country was going to go back to normal and I would be involved in that. Anyway, not so. There was hardly anybody there and the wind was still freezing and I was freezing. And so I went to Mr. Strapping and I said, do I really have to stay? You know, I'm a bit cold here. And he said, no, it's all right. You can go home. I think we'll manage without you. So I didn't even wait the 15 minutes I was supposed to wait to see if I got anaphylactic shock. I rushed to my car, jumped in the car, had some tea that I had in a thermos cup there, and started feeling a bit better about things. Anyway, as I was driving home, it hit me that this story, that this thing that I'd been through, this boring, momentous thing, where I'd had this vaccine, which we've all been waiting for, right? With bated breath all these months. And then suddenly there's this miraculous cure and I got it. This was major, but it was so boring and so nothingy. And I just thought, this is wrong. There should have been drama, right? Right? Maybe because I'm thinking this, as I'm driving home, it comes into my head, first of all, that maybe I'll have anaphylactic shock on the way home and I'll die and it'll all be for nothing. But second of all, that this was just like the occasion 37 years previous when I lost my virginity. Now, you didn't know the story was going there, did you?
Wow.
So I don't know how we're doing for time. Do I need to?
You're fine. We're there. We're there with you.
I'm winding up.
You're good.
All right. So here's the connection. So I start thinking on my drive home, and it's only about 7 minutes. No, it's 12 minutes drive home. So I have 12 minutes.
Oh God.
I have 12 minutes to think about this. Actually, not quite, Lily, not quite. And what I think about is that, you know, I lost my virginity aged 18, but I didn't want to. Just like I was very anxious about going to have this vaccine, and there was so much build up, and then sort of nothing. When I was 18, I had a boyfriend from high school. I'd gone to this boys' high school. So in England, there were girls' schools and boys' schools, and I had a scholarship to go to this boys' school for my junior and senior year, and I grabbed that opportunity. Talk about luck, right? I grabbed that opportunity because I'd been at an all-girls school until I was 16, and I had had enough of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I threw myself into completely the opposite situation, where I was one of very few girls in this boys' school that had just started taking girls. And it wasn't quite as happy a situation as perhaps I'd imagined, because the culture there was not so different from the Gamecocks culture. And I had this boyfriend who I was quite fond of. But he just pushed and pushed and pushed about me sleeping with him. And I didn't want to. I wasn't ready. At that point in my life, I went to church. I was a good Christian girl. And that was one of my excuses. My other excuse was it was statutory rape until I was 18. Maybe it was before that. And the third excuse was I just wasn't ready, right? There were probably some other excuses I managed to find as well. But he just, every time I would go to his house, he would just ask and ask and ask and tell me what I was missing and how he'd already slept with his 15-year-old girlfriend previous to me, and she'd loved it, and so would I. So I think it was probably about, I don't know how many months in, we'd been dating for about 4 months. I was at his house and he was asking and asking and asking, and I just got so bored. And I said, and I said, no, 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 no. And then finally I said, oh, all right then. And that was how I lost my virginity. And it was an extremely unsatisfying and dull event, just like getting my COVID-19 vaccine. And yet, how momentous, because of course everything shifted in that moment. So what was my point here? What was my point? Well, I guess my point is that that being pushed into something I didn't want and giving into it out of boredom has affected my entire, I look back on it now, this was decades ago, right? But I look back on it now and it absolutely colored my entire understanding of sexual relations and intimate relations, not in a good way, right? Not in a good way, to the point where I think that when I react to things like seeing the Gamecock Stadium and the stories that surround that and my own experience, that's why I cry, because it didn't begin well, and it has gone on not going well. And yeah, so that's my momentous, boring story.
Thank you. Thank you. That was amazing, Nicola.
Thank you.
Yeah, the story certainly wasn't boring. All that boredom on your part made for a great story for us.
Yeah, it was an incredible story.
Thank you, Nicola. You had me the minute you said a mere 55 years old. So next time you come to Brooklyn, please, Lily, let us know, okay?
Yes. Wait,
All right, our final storyteller for tonight is
What was the question, Lily?
Is Nicola?
I didn't tonight. I was good.
Madeira.
Oh, Nicola.
Ah.
Okay, so I'm going to read you Marcus's bio. Marcus Scurry serves as the program director for Kamba. He'll tell me if I said it right. He has 20 plus years of nonprofit experience and began his career in 1999. He currently serves Kamba and oversees their East New York Cornerstone Youth Development Program that serves children and families in the East New York section of Brooklyn. He's the founder of Real Men Mentor, a grassroots mentoring program that serves middle school males and young, fearless, and Black, a lifestyle brand that speaks to the essence of Black culture. The Marcus and Friends Quarantine and Chill podcast, I love that title, and Be the Change, a community service initiative that addresses community disparities and develops leadership, civic engagement, and team building skills for young people. I'm not going to read you the rest of his bio, but it is on the website. It's extensive. He's well recognized and apparently a proud alumni. I will read you his last line. Oh, and that he was identified as a 40 under 40 star. And the last line in his bio says, Marcus is committed to service, mentoring youth, and transforming communities. Marcus Scurry.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. Well, hello, everyone. Thumbs up if you guys can hear me. You guys can hear me? Okay. So I just feel so grateful and so fortunate to share this space and the stage, so to speak, with all the other presenters tonight. I was honored when Jackie sort of approached me, emailed me about the opportunity. So I'm so happy. I feel so grateful to be here tonight. Luck sort of is like the resounding theme in my life. So I have so many different stories like that are going to be married in one as I guess close us out tonight. So thank you guys. I was so inspired by each of your stories, Francis, Nicola, and Catherine. So wow, let's get started. So who am I? I am Marcus Scurry, and I was born August 28th, 1980, to very young parents. They were married. My mom was born and raised in Philadelphia, and my dad was born and raised in South Carolina. So my mom would come down south to visit family during the summers, she and my aunts. And so yes. So Philly girl and Southern boy. So you could imagine. So the stars aligned. They fell in love with each other. And so 3 summers in a row, she and my aunts would come down every summer, and she would hang out with my dad and my uncles and my dad's sister. And so they began dating. And they were like a young, starstruck couple in love. So they decided to start they started to get married and then start a family. So my mom gets pregnant very on. She has my oldest sister in 1977, and then they have me in 1980. Well, during the course of their marriage, of course, they were young, and we're talking about the 80s. So drugs were prevalent, alcohol was prevalent. So they were a party couple. They partied and, had sex and partied and had sex and got pregnant with little Marcus. So little Marcus was born August 28th, 1980, but I was born premature. And so that would be the beginning of my luck journey, or my dance with luck, because when I was born, I had to fight to survive. My lungs were, I was premature, which meant my lungs were not fully developed. So I stayed in the incubator for months. And so they actually thought that I wouldn't survive. The doctors pretty much said, there's no way that this child can survive. And we're talking about the 80s. So technology, of course, was not what technology is now. So, but luckily, once again, the stars aligned, and here I am. So I survived the incubator and I began my life journey. And so for me, when I think about luck, I would like to say that luck, like life, when I think about luck in life, I would say that life is based solely on probability. When you get out of the bed in the morning, there's a 50% chance that you will have a great day. There's also a 50% chance that you'll have a bad day, but the choice is yours. So to me, luck and probability work hand in hand, and I like to call them first cousins, so to speak. And so in addition to the challenges in my childhood as a baby, fighting to survive, I went through, a normal childhood for the most part, but right before my second birthday, my parents decided that the stars really didn't align that well. And while they were partying and drinking and having lots of sex, they really didn't know each other, and they really didn't love each other. So they decided to separate. So my mom goes back north, and she leaves my sister and I with my dad and his parents in the South. And so my sister and I would spend some summers in the North, and then we would come back to the South. And so eventually my dad gets custody of my sister and I. And so we become South transplants, so to speak. And so he and my mom separate, they get divorced. And then my dad meets another woman, and they start dating. And so the stars align, they fall in love, they get married. So by this time I'm 5. And so for the most part, with my dad's new marriage, life seems to be coming full circle. Everything seems to be going amazing. I'm sorry about that. And life is good. So I grew up from 5 until, I'm gonna say college. I'm gonna fast forward to college. Okay, so in college, there was a struggle financially because my parents just were not prepared to send me to a private school in Charlotte. So once again, the stars align. I go and I have a conversation with someone in financial aid, and they are enamored by my personality and my assertiveness to be successful and to really get this degree. And so they find financial aid for me. So I'm able to go to Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte. Yes, everything's good. So my first semester, freshman year, because I was going to a private school, I had to prove myself. So there really wasn't that much financial aid. So my parents would send me money as they could. So I had to find a job just to eat and survive and thrive. So but I was smart. I stayed in the library on Sunday. I partied, of course, drank, of course, but I also was smart. On Sundays, I studied so that I could hopefully have a great GPA so that I could get scholarships my second semester freshman year. So 3.5 GPA, the end of my first semester freshman year, I'm now eligible for scholarships. Yay. So going to my second semester freshman year, I have 2 scholarships, one from Bank of America and another from a fraternity organization. Everything's going great. So I go home that summer, I work, save my money, I go back sophomore year. Go home for Christmas sophomore year, and bam, my dad and I are involved in a car accident. We hit a tree and I wasn't wearing my seatbelt. So I crushed my femur bone in my left leg. So that means that now I have to learn how to walk all over again. So everything was going so great in college. I was happy. I found a relationship. Life was good. I had 2 scholarships. Everything was just coming full circle. And now the car accident, December 29th, 2002. So I now have to spend weeks in the hospital. I crushed my femur bone in my left leg. So I have a rod implanted in my left leg, have to go through weeks of physical therapy, and unfortunately can't return to school that spring semester. So I'm devastated. That means I had a life plan. Everything was going great. And now my life plan is, here's another dance with luck. So I spend weeks in aggressive physical therapy, regaining the ability to walk. And I'm determined to prove my doctors and prove my physical therapists and prove my family wrong. I'm going to learn how to walk again so I can go back to school and finish what I started. And I do. So we had the accident December 29th. I'm walking March 2nd, determined to go back to school. So that summer I go back to school. And I'm like, yes, okay, everything's going great. My last semester of my senior year, I'm taking the statistics class that's kicking my ass. And I'm studying and I'm studying and I'm preparing, and I failed every test. I failed every quiz, I failed every test. And the professor says, unfortunately, you're not gonna be able to graduate. I'm like, oh, I'm already a year behind because of the accident. So now the statistics class is preventing my graduation. And so I go in deep prayer. And I'm like, Dr. Ahmed, please, I'm already a year behind. My classmates have already graduated. Like, my family is really hoping and praying that this is my year. I have to finish, and I reminded him of my car accident and all the challenges and struggles and how I fought so hard to be at this particular place and space. And he says, I'm sorry, but you failed every test. You're not prepared to graduate. And I returned home devastated, crushed, because now I have to make the phone call to my family and say, once again, I won't be graduating. So I'm devastated. I go in a deep depression. Well, unknown to me, the registrar and another professor have a conversation with Dr. Ahmed. And they're like, Marcus, come on. He has fought so hard. You see that, this is the only class that would prevent him. Please, is there something you can do? He gives me a C. And I'm able to graduate, so I get my degree. Yes, 2005, May 2005. And it's like the world is mine. Now, everything that I prayed for, everything that I worked so hard to get is finally coming full circle, and life is good. Okay. And then I enter a toxic relationship. It's abusive, both mentally and physically. And I fall into a deep depression. And because of our relationship, a lot of my closest family and friends sort of turn their back on me because they don't agree with my lifestyle choice. So once again, I'm devastated. When I thought that love would find me, I found myself chasing love for all the wrong reasons. And I didn't have the strong support system to really navigate that storm. So once again, my dance with luck. And so fast forward 2015, I'm in a place where I'm stressed, I'm depressed, and I'm miserable. And I know that there has to be something bigger and better waiting for me. I feel very stuck and complacent in the state of South Carolina. I have an amazing job where I make amazing money, but I'm not really making a difference. I'm just punching the clock and bringing home great money. I have a great place. I'm now in a healthy relationship and the relationship is going well, but I'm not happy. And I'm like, what should I do? So I start to pray. And then in my prayer, at the end of my prayer, I realized that there's something more for me to do. I'm not living my best life. So I make a crazy decision to some, but amazing to me, to leave my job and relocate to New York City. I know nothing about New York City, nothing besides the fact that some of my family members live here, but that's all I know. I visited New York once. But I just was determined, and I knew that New York was the place I was supposed to be. And so in July of 2015, I have a conversation with my then partner, and I tell him that I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to move to New York. And at first he thinks I'm crazy. And then he says, if it's going to make you happy, do it. You have to live your life for you. And worried about what my family would say, because I've always wanted their approval and their, I guess, stamp of satisfaction, I don't tell them right away. I wait until 2 weeks prior to my move to tell them that I'm moving to New York. And I'm going to chase my dreams and chase my passion and my purpose. And so I'm very nervous when I pick up my cell phone to call my stepmom and my dad, because they've always been very domineering and very demanding. And I'm not ready for that conversation, because they're going to say, why are you going to leave your good job to go to New York? You don't know anybody besides a little bit of family, but you still don't really know them. Where you're going to work, where you're going to stay, you know, all those questions that parents ask that you're not really ready for sometimes, even though I was an adult. So I pick up the phone and I place the call. And my stepmom says, New York, what brought this? And I said, I just need to change. I need to change. And I think that New York has been calling me, and I feel like that's where I'm supposed to be. And so we agreed to have dinner a week before I leave. And so we have dinner, and I'm dreading the dinner because my dad's going to be there, and he's very aggressive. And I think that he's going to talk me down and just, you know, just dissuade me to move. And the opposite happened. Actually, everyone is really happy that I'm finally living my life and doing what Marcus wants to do. And I'm not seeking the satisfaction and approval from anybody. So I'm very relieved about that. And I said, oh my God, I'm on the perfect journey. Like, life is happening. It's coming. Life is happening, and it's happening for me finally. And so July 2015, I moved to New York with a couple $100 in my pocket and a one-way bus ticket on the mega bus. I come to New York, and I am so happy because I sleep the entire way. And as I wake up, the bus driver announces that we are in Manhattan, and I look to my left or my right, I forget, I was so excited, and I see Lady Liberty. And for me, seeing her there symbolizes freedom and liberty. And my New York journey is what that my New York journey
Marcus,
really is. Yes.
Every New Yorker on this is trying to figure out if it's on your left or right now. Pertaining to the megabus. We're like, did he come through Jersey? If he came through Jersey, it's on his right. If he came through the tunnel, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're all trying to like allocate where you're at.
Thank you for that. I don't know. All I know is She was somewhere in the distance and I saw her. And I'm so thrilled because for me, it was like, this is the beginning of my liberty and my freedom, you know, my liberation, so to speak. And so I knew I had made the best decision. And so I always tell people when I decided to leave my comfort zone in the South and move to Brooklyn, my decision was based solely on luck and probability. There was a high chance that I would come to New York and fail and fall flat on my face and then be forced to go back south. But there was also a probability that I would take flight and soar like an eagle. And the way I saw it, I could stay complacent and comfortable in the South or step out on faith and pray that things would work out. I'm so happy that 5.5 years later, I'm still here. I'm still here, and I live in the best borough in the land, Brooklyn.
What neighborhood? What neighborhood? Oh, Jackie, fuck you, Jackie. Jackie's all about the boogie down. Jackie's considering the boogie down.
That's right.
He came to the Liberty Tube. He came to the Liberty Tube, so that means he came up 95 South, and that the Liberty was on his right.
Lady Liberty gave me favor to live in the best borough in New York. I have an amazing career. I'm pursuing my purpose, and I'm walking in my passion. And so, of course, I've had 4 different jobs since I've been here. You know, Jackie and I met each other working at Citizen Schools, which was a huge flop for me. It didn't work out, but that door closed. Yes, for you too, Jackie. So that door closed so many others could open, you know, and I sort of stumbled across Canva by mistake. You know, I'm just walking in Flatbush and I see a door that says Canva, and I was like, oh, that's weird. There's a red door that says Canva. What is Canva? And I Google it, and then that night I look and they're hiring for a program director. And I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. I have experience in youth development, and I apply and I instantly get the job. And so many doors have opened through my my experience with Canva. I've been you know, able to sort of mentor staff, create some amazing programs at my program site, really empower the community in East New York, and just make lifelong friends and connections that I wouldn't have made had I stayed comfortable and safe and complacent in South Carolina. And while love still doesn't live here, I'm happily single. I know that the next time that luck comes around, maybe I will find that amazing counterpart and we can tackle the world together. I've decided to live my life in my 40s on purpose and with intention. And my advice to you is to take the leap, walk out on faith, and live your best life, and do it while you can. That's it. That's my story.
Marcus, there's a very low chance that you're going to be dating a guy that has a shirt that says "Go Cox" in New York. But you left South Carolina. I always look for the kismet. I always look for
Nice
like
callback.
the
Good callback.
serendipity in all of these stories. You're not going to be dating a guy that has a shirt that says "Go Cox."
No, I think I would run from the guy that has the shirt "Go Cox." I think I'll go in the other direction.
You came through the Liberty Tubes. That means that you were on the right side of the train of the bus, and you could have had.
But he won't take Megabus. He'll probably take Go-To Bus or something, or Greyhound.
You had good Wi-Fi the entire time you slept. You
I had great Wi-Fi the entire time.
You paid for that Wi-Fi and you slept through the entire time.
I paid for that Wi-Fi.
Marcus, I have an interesting observation, which is that you initially failed your statistics class, but then much of your story, you talked about probability, and I just find that a very interesting sort of thread. And you ultimately passed your statistics, and I think you earned that, you know, with your mastery of probability. So
thank you for that observation. Tell my former professor that.
I like that you went with the sympathy.
Man, if you're listening, thank you for the challenge. Man.
The sympathy C is a really good sympathy C. It's like, come on, I had a right leg. I needed some. And
But the crazy thing about that class, there were only 8 students in that class.
Oh, wow.
And
eight specifically.
8 students. He would make us read the Wall Street Journal. We had to give reports on the Wall Street Journal. I mean, it was a great class, but the material was so hard, and everybody failed. But he wrote me. I don't know if sometimes people give you a hard time because they see your potential when you don't see it yourself. But he was so mean to me, and I was like, dude, I'm just trying to graduate, please.
They don't usually fail you and then like at the very end give you a C out of potential. It's usually because like we got to get this guy graduated.
Yeah, we got to get. I think he just felt.
Yeah.
Yes.
You need to be graduated. You were ready.
Yes, I was ready. Well over ready.
You know, the open source children's program actually teaches a lot at campus sites.
Oh, that's
so
right.
The Flagstone Family Shelter,
Yes.
and Whitman, and all of these schools that Canva oversees. So we have
Yes.
a lot of Canva.
That's a pitch for Monica to come work for her, but do not teach statistics. Sorry, my bad.
I have to tell you that Marcus and I were the oldest employees at Citizen Schools. So when I saw, and he's much younger than me, but when I saw his face across the room, I was like, I'm going to make him my friend. And when we had to tell our stories, Marcus's and I were very similar. And it was just a great experience. And we stayed in touch ever since then.
Yes, and it's so funny you say that, Jackie, because we never know why we meet people. Everything is probability. Everything's by chance. And who knew, Jackie, 5 years later, we're still... And look how life happened for us. We're happy and we're doing amazing things aside from Citizen Schools.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you, Marcus, for that story. I think there was a South Carolina connection in just about everybody's story tonight as
That's
well.
so crazy.
So that was I thought tonight was wonderful, and I want to thank everybody, and I will let Lily close us out.
Oh yeah, I was going to go to the next month. Next month, April, what would it be? Hello. The 30th. The 30th of April. Wait, what is that? 30 days of September, April, June, and November. So, okay. April is the last Friday of the month, and we're hoping that we're gonna get to do it live. I mean, those of you who
at the gallery.
At the gallery, right? And what we've been doing, and what we probably will continue to do, I'm thinking, because we have the technology, is and because we have Melanie.
She'll be there.
Melanie is the technology.
Yeah. We can do this thing where we have live drinking cheap wine, telling stories, and we have the projection of the Zoom people across. So we can have people from Alaska and even as far as South Carolina. So yay.
Lily, you always look so relaxed being a host. I feel like the very last show, you should just be driving a Cadillac, like with like with the phone like attached to the rear view. Just like
I don't know. I think I was nervous the whole time watching you. I was afraid you were gonna crash. You're gonna get too excited.
I was immersed.
You're just a good multitasker. Well, thank you, everybody.
It was so good.
Yeah, it was really fun, and thank you, Jackie. And next month live, for as many people as we can who are in the vicinity.
Do we know what's the next show? Monica, what's the next show?
Is your daughter home for good?
Who, me?
Oh, because what's the next show, Monica? What's the next show in open source next month? Is she there? Is Monica gone?
Yes, I'm
Monica?
here. The next show is Dominica Castle. I put it in the link too, and it is gonna open up on April 8th, and it's up until May 16th. So it's definitely for April. We have Dominica's show up. It's gonna be really a lot going on, holograms and things to see.
Isn't there a church of Monica?
Holograms.
Isn't there?
There's
Tupac's gonna be there.
there is a Church of Monica too. Yes.
What's the date?
That
What's the
is
date?
gonna be. Hold on. A Church of Monica is gonna be on the 2nd. Elizabeth Hanoff is gonna be on Sunday, April 11th at 11 a.m. I did a studio visit with her. She was really amazing. I encourage everybody for coming to that one. It's gonna be really good. Sunday, April 11th, 11 a.m.
Great. Go to church.
I know you don't have to
The
necessarily.
New York version of that, Marcus. It's not the same, but it's really wonderful.
It's not too
There
early.
might-
Marcus, you're my first person that's actually in Brooklyn. So let's get to the gallery together at some point, please.
Oh yeah, that was my other favorite moment of serendipity was when Marcus tonight said the best borough in New York City, and Jackie was like, "Pop, pop, 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 pop."
It was trying to make you feel good.
Oh,
All right.
I love it.
All right. Thanks, folks. It was great.
Thanks for showing up, everybody. Love your
Good night,
All right,
everybody.
Katy,
visages.
sending you love.
Bye.
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 Good night, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Bye. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Jackie.